Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. Today we're going to talk about American common culture. American common culture is no more rooted in British pedigree than Indian common culture is shaped by the British Raj. Some influences are inherent. The language, for example. In America, everybody expects others to speak English, but there are differences in American and British pronunciations and spellings. In India, people mix English with local languages, customizing their hybrid languages to suit their needs. Both the United States and India were subjects of the British Empire. When the British reached America, they saw the native population as barbaric and savage, but Native Americans had tribal communities that banded together to form nations. They had their own laws, and they still have their unique languages. Large swaths of Native Americans suffered and died from various diseases ships from Europe brought with them. Those who were left were driven into reservations, their children sent to reconditioning camps so colonists could erase native culture. They did not succeed. And while this war for American common culture waged between Native Americans and British Europeans who had immigrated and taken over native land by force, residents of these colonies who were now Americans by birth were also fighting to seek independence from British rule. America fought a war of independence against the British. The conflict itself stands proof that American founding fathers saw the United States as a separate entity than the British Empire. We didn't want a king. We started an experiment in democracy and became a constitutional republic instead of being part of a constitutional monarchy. Surely this included culture local to America and unrelated to British culture. Surely there was a divergence from traditions and cultures of monarchy to self-rule. In India, British culture faced steeper resistance. When the British arrived in India, India accounted for 25% of the global economy. But the British saw Indians as inferior. The British tried to, but failed to wipe out broad swaths of the Indian population as well. Their brutal tactics divided and conquered principalities. They exploited the weaknesses of the Mughal dynasty that had dominion over most principalities in the Indian subcontinent. They manufactured famines that killed millions over decades that the British Empire ruled India. And most importantly, the British had war technology that was far more advanced than Indians. Guns, cannons, and gunpowder went a long way to conquer India in small increments at a time. But their tactics didn't succeed. India, instead of fighting a war of independence like America did, under Gandhi's leadership, who was influenced by Jesus' teachings of peace, love, and forgiveness, chose the path of peace, nonviolent non-cooperation, and civil disobedience to defeat the British. It took Indians longer, and the Raj's ill impacts are felt even to this day in the Indian subcontinent's geopolitics. All this is to say that America's culture and history more resembles India's history because both countries were once subjects of Britain. Also, while America, supposedly a Christian country, fought a war of independence, not what Christ would have advised, Gandhi harnessed Christ and even the American Constitution's guarantee of the right to peaceful protest to defeat the British. Seen from this vantage point, American common culture is at least parallel to Indian common culture and divergent from British culture. British culture is the thing that connects the two cultures because both were ruled by Britain. So we know that when supporters of American common culture limit their ideology to white culture, they aren't talking about common historical culture, but rather a race-based ideology that doesn't hold much water when looked at closely. White men dominated colonial history. In America, women were property and so were African Americans. They had no rights under the Constitution. Successive generations cured that flaw through amendments to our Constitution that gave women and African Americans freedom and the right to vote. But that race superiority hardly counts as part of our common culture with the British. The British treated American colonists with the same disdain as they treated Indians during the British Raj. Indians were second-class citizens in their own land and could not use certain streets or ride on trains and buses with white colonists. They were relegated to second and third-class accommodations while the British enjoyed first class. American society, supposedly mimicking British culture, imposed these divisive practices against people of color long into the 20th century. In America, the British imposed taxes on everything, much like they did in India. In America, British taxes on tea sparked a rebellion. In India, British taxes on salt sparked a rebellion, albeit peaceful. This discrimination is more a part of American and Indian common culture than any cultural influences the British left in either country. It would be flawed at best to align American common culture with British, Scottish, Irish, Anglo-Saxon culture. Firstly, the British conquered Scotland, and even to this day, there is visible friction between England and Scotland, with many in Scotland still wanting independence from England. The British also have a conflict-ridden history with the Irish people. And Irish people were discriminated against just like other European races when they first started migrating to the United States. The only thing that was common among Europeans and white Americans was the color of their skin. It wasn't even the language. Scottish and Irish are separate languages than English, and Christopher Columbus, somebody white Americans embrace, was from Spain and spoke Spanish. But the skin color of Europeans made it easier to assimilate into the white society some colonists were determined to build. But that doesn't mean American culture came from them or it became British common culture just because of the contempt some Americans harbored against other immigrant races. American common culture evolved to include white culture, but also has indelible parts that shifted away from a male, white-dominated patriarchy. America's cumulative common culture cannot be simplistically condensed into being male, white, and heteronormative. We moved forward from those archaic notions of property rights and dominance. We understood then, and we understand better now, that America's promise isn't a monolithic where white patriarchy rules and dominates. It is an assimilation of cultures and traditions from virtually every part of the world. It is a culture where we constantly strive to deliver equality in law and everyday life to anybody who seeks it. America's immigrant culture is not Anglo-Saxon driven. America's native cultures are not Anglo-Saxon driven. We still have a long way to go to define what exactly American culture is, because it is constantly evolving and constantly embracing new people and new ideas. This makes America's common culture unique and nothing like British common culture. Our evolving culture still needs to build an equal playing field for women, starting with paying women the same as men are paid in the same jobs. Our evolving culture needs to properly integrate sexual minorities into a system where they are also given equal rights as heteronormative relationships and families. We still need to rise above the propaganda that keeps drawing us deeper into the abyss of race-based superiority. Such notions of superiority have plagued the world since the days of European exploration and colonialism. We need to stop that propaganda and embrace identities and cultures that belong as part of America's common culture. Without our diversity of thought and culture, America could have never been the global leader it became after World War II. Without the help of Native American coders, without the help of women who took up men's jobs and supported the military's mission, without the help of African Americans who fought and died for America, America's power could not have reached its full potential during World War II. American common culture is a whole lot more than a race-based common culture that excludes all races except white and all genders except straight men. While superiority movements have been part of society as long as societies have existed, they never defined society. They are recurring aberrations rather than defining characteristics of a nation. So, sorry, Justice Scalia, just because you felt more at home in England than France doesn't mean America's common culture is more English than it is anything else. In fact, the French greatly influenced American culture in Louisiana, and we can very much taste that influence to this day in Louisiana's Southern comfort food. Race, sex, and language cannot be the sole indicators of how a national culture forms. Doing so limits the idea of culture, a history and tradition that grows to become part of our society over time, and from which we get our tastes, identities, strength, perspective, and vision for an ever-evolving common culture. It steeps over time and morphs with every new addition to it. America's common culture is a living, breathing experience, a song and dance of the old and new, of mistakes and redemptions. I stand with the understanding that our evolving common culture informs our histories and traditions that make it implicit in the concept of ordered liberty to include emergent rights and liberties as we evolve and expand the capacity of self-rule and human dignity. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon.